teach geography and GIS there, and I'm excited to share a little bit about my experience in Kazakhstan.
So before we get into it, can everybody hear me? Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm just going to provide a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. So the way that we've designed this session is really, both for folks who are interested in applying to the program themselves, as well as for anyone who's interested in promoting the program on their campus to their colleagues. So we'll be doing an overview of the Fulbright Specialist Program. I'll provide some examples of project activities, and John is going to be talking about his experience as a specialist in Kazakhstan. And then we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the program itself and talk about some of the more in the weeds items like eligibility criteria. And as you may have heard, this program utilizes a roster-based system, so we will talk about that and how individuals are matched to projects, as well as what we're learning actually assists with for those individuals that receive grants. And we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for Q&A. And I'm aware that we're standing between you all and lunch later today, so we're going to be keeping time. All right, so before we get into the Fulbright Specialist Program, I did want to take a moment to talk about the Fulbright Program and just provide a little bit of a broader context. So many of you, I'm sure, are probably familiar with the Fulbright Program already. It was founded in 1946, and it's a program of the U.S. Department of State. Really, there are dozens of different opportunities, various programs available under the Fulbright Program, but broadly speaking, it offers international educational and cultural exchange programs for a diverse variety of individuals, students, scholars, professionals, artists, and they either teach, do research, or pursue professional projects abroad. Zooming in on the Fulbright Specialist Program, so this program is maybe about as old as some of your students now. It was established in 2001, and World Learning serves as the implementing partner. And just in a few brief sentences, really what this program is an opportunity for U.S. academics and established professionals, so mid to senior career professionals and academics, to complete 2 to 6 week projects. And those projects are designed by a range of overseas institutions. The goals of this program are really to connect institutions overseas with expertise from the U.S. and help build their capacity and accomplish the goals that they have self-identified. And the hope is that by connecting individuals from the U.S. with these institutions, that the program is really going to help strengthen connections and strengthen mutual understanding and also create relationships. The program is fairly large. There are, at this point, 160 different participating countries, as well as other areas that are eligible, such as the African Union. And we have about 425 individuals who receive grants to travel under the specialist program, and those grants are happening year-round, so they're not constrained to a specific semester. I did want to take an opportunity to highlight some of the associate and baccalaureate associate institutions that have produced Fulbright specialists. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but this is some institutions that have produced specialists over the last 2 to 3 years. So certainly we absolutely welcome applicants from community colleges and associate and baccalaureate associate institutions. Why might you want to participate in this program? I have you in the room, so I think I have a captive audience, and I might be preaching to the choir a little bit, but really, the specialist program is an excellent opportunity to gain cross-cultural professional development experience and, take your expertise to another country and help provide some international exposure to yourself, as well as share that knowledge with an institution overseas. And really, institutions overseas that are participating in this program, they provide their own resources and they're providing their own funding to bring you to their institution. So they are very invested in the process and invested in building those connections. And finally, it is a great way to access a global network of Fulbright alumni. As you might have seen in that last slide, there's over 370,000, probably more now, individuals that have participated in the Fulbright program. In terms of the more material benefits, which I know are important, the intention with the Fulbright Specialist Program is that your participation is fully funded. So funding is provided from two key sources. One is from the U.S. Department of State, which provides your funding associated with your travel, including a transit allowance, and then a limited health benefits plan. We also cover any visa fees that might be required for your participation. And then you would receive an honorarium of $200 per day for the duration of your grant activities. And then the host institution, as I mentioned earlier, does provide support for your participation, and that support comes in the form of lodging, meals, and your in-country transportation. So this does vary by country context. The host institutions are providing this support, so it's also dependent on their context. One very common practice is if they've got, sort of short-term housing on their campus. If that's available to them, that might be a place where you'd be staying during your specialist grant. But the specific lodging arrangements for every specialist project are kind of made clear in the project proposals. It's information that you would have beforehand. What individuals are able to apply to the program, and also what types of projects can take place. There are 24 eligible disciplines available under the Fulbright Specialist Program. And within these disciplines, there's a wide range of projects that can be represented. So just an example that I'll provide, I've highlighted here under the American U.S. Studies discipline. It does include topics in the arts and humanities. Another very common question we receive is about, for example, people who are in psychology, whether that's an eligible discipline. That's available as a specialization under public and global health. So if there's anyone in the room who has sort of intersectional expertise or expertise that you're not necessarily seeing as one of these 24 disciplines, I would encourage you to take a look at the application and view the specializations that are available under these disciplines as well. I mentioned that a range of institutions participate in this program. So one unique thing is just the sheer variety of institutions that can participate. As you all know, Fulbright has a very strong legacy with institutions of higher education around the world. So there are many, many institutions of higher education around the world that participate in this program. But there's also a large number of government institutions that are eligible and who do participate. So that could be anything from ministries. We've had courts that have hosted specialists, conservatories, nonprofits, as well as public health organizations. So we've talked about what host specialists, what types of disciplines are happening, but what do specialists actually do? I get this question all the time, and it is a little bit challenging to answer because the projects are designed by host institutions overseas, the range of activities that you could conduct as a specialist is very diverse. But the important thing to keep in mind is that all projects include an education, training, or capacity building component. The Fulbright Specialist Program really isn't focused on providing funding for personal research projects, whether that's a research project that a faculty member might have overseas or research that you are doing. The focus is on concrete activities that have a really clear goal. Because these are short-term programs, the focus is on creating that impact in that short time period. So I've highlighted some activities that are very popular, requested, and I think John will be able to provide more insight into what this looked like for his project. But one thing that is common is that you might be asked to do a combination of activities. So you may be providing some training, but then also between those trainings, meeting with faculty to consult on curriculum development, for example. So before John talks about his project, I just want to provide one project example. Amirah Phillips, who is at Highline Community College in Washington State, she was requested by the Namibia University of Science and Technology to help them design a digital forensic workshop. And as I mentioned, you often are doing multiple activities. So she did that, and then she also assisted them to design and host a national cyber competition. So Highline already had an existing relationship with Nest, and this project really helped them revitalize that relationship. She's reported out that they've now been able to send individuals from Nest back to Highline to meet with them there and explore further opportunities for partnership. So this can be a great opportunity to gain new experience with a potential partner overseas, but also maybe just strengthen the nascent connection that you might have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John. John?
Privet, hello. Thanks Amirah and World Learning for providing me this opportunity to share my experience in Kazakhstan. I hope I'm able to convey the warm welcome that the folks in Kazakhstan gave me, and also share the very enriching experience I had there in Kazakhstan. So as I mentioned, I'm a geography and GIS professor at Monroe Community College in upstate New York in Rochester. So ever since I was a child, I always had a passion for geography and global cultures. Back in 2013, I was a part of a SUNY collaborative online international learning, or COIL, maybe some of you have heard of it, Turkish initiative. And this experience really opened my eyes to global education, not just for me, but it also brought some awesome opportunities for my students. Fulbright really wasn't on my radar until my former global education director, Gail Lynch, invited a fellow or a Fulbrighter to our campus, and I was hooked, so I applied. So after being accepted onto the Fulbright Specialist roster, I was trying to find a match, and it took some time, but Adrian Earlinger of the American Councils for International Education helped me make a match with the Director of Cooperation at Kazakh State Agro-Technical University. And there we discussed the objectives. So my role there in K2, or Kazakh State Agro-Technical University, was one, to provide a remote sensing training to faculty. Two, to develop an app for the Kazakh farmers so that they could receive near real-time assessment of their crops. Three, to provide online strategies. So I teach a lot of online courses. So, and they see that as part of their future. And four, to develop a sustainable partnership. So what was my day-to-day experience like? Typically would wake up, go for a jog to a river about 4 or 5 miles away, which divides Old Town and New Town. Then I would head into campus about 9:30 or so, and start teaching at about 10 a.m. So on the very first day, I was there, at 9:30 I was all ready to to go. 10 o'clock rolls around and no one was there. 10:15, a few people start to roll in, and we start class maybe about 10:20 or so. So that was an experience. The next day, I noticed that they were all having chai, tea, in a small cafe at about 9:45. So from then on out, we started class in the cafe, and so it was all about making a personal connection before getting into the content. So I would teach for 2 hours from 10 to noon, and then we would all have lunch together between 12 and about 2, maybe go for a short walk, and then from 2 to 4, I would teach for another couple hours before discussing how things went with the director and the remote sensing center. There you can see. So there's the remote sensing center, and there are some of the faculty on the left doing activity outside, just some basic GPS GPS data collection. In the evenings, it was June, so the weather was nice, and I would typically go on really long walks and see how the locals lived. So, fantastic experience. Some of the faculty knew very little English, and I knew very little Russian. So we used Google Translate all the time, and we really had to trust each other because it would say something, and you know they didn't really mean that. So we just had to kind of laugh it off half the time. In my last week, instead of training faculty, I worked with the Remote Sensing Center, which is there on the right. You can see their drone. So this is very high level remote sensing that they're doing. So the government is really putting a lot of money into their center, and it's focused on agriculture. And so we had lots of different activities, including that one on the app development for the Kazakh farmers. The food. I like to eat healthy, and there was actually a lot of options. So I was really excited about that. Had lots of plov and lots of chai. I'm now totally converted to tea, so that's my go-to drink now. The hotel that I'm staying at actually doesn't have tea, so called up this morning, got some tea. I also had a chance to do some weekend excursions. I shared a 3-hour taxi to Burabay, which is a Russian resort town. You can see the last 3 photos here on the right is Burabay, and so I had a chance to go hike and bike in Burabay, and they love their ice cream there. All the tourists, there was about every 100, 200 feet along the main street, there was like a little ice cream stand. So I had to join in and have some ice cream there. I also had a chance to go to Alma-Ata, which is the former capital of Kazakhstan, and just a beautiful city. If you haven't been, just one of my favorite cities in the world. You can see the Zenkov Cathedral here, and the Green Market, which is absolutely huge. So I had a great time there in Alma-Ata. Also had a chance to go to the Tian Shan Mountains, which is just 40 minutes from the center of Alma-Ata. And so hiked around there in the top left there. My guest also gave me a tour of Nur-Sultan, and that picture there on the far left, that's the right before we entered the mosque, the largest mosque in Kazakhstan, in Nur-Sultan. So they also showed me the Russian military museum as well. We also went to a Uzbek restaurant, and that's where I learned how to drink vodka appropriately. So before you drink, you give a toast. And you have to, you say something meaningful. So it's not, about drinking the vodka, it's about making that connection. So that was a very, it was just a very warm experience. They first brought a really big bottle of vodka, and I was very worried. But then they just poured little amounts. So, how has this experience benefited me professionally? It's been absolutely just amazing. It's brought so many different opportunities. I like to write grants. So I've written 3 proposals recently. One SUNY Innovative Instructional Technology Grant that's helped to fund a project with a university in Colombia, in Cartagena, Colombia, where they're doing some virtual internships where we're looking at assessing mangrove health using remote sensing. We have a project in San Luis Potosí in Mexico where we're one of my GIS students are teaching the faculty how to develop an app so that local citizens can collect water quality data. We also have a project in the Monteverde Institute in Costa Rica where we're using remote sensing to study land cover changes there in the Monteverde region. And we also have a new grant thanks to the U.S. Embassy in Kazakhstan to fund a sustained relationship with K2, and students are interning virtually with a project on trying to identify wheat disease using remote sensing. So that's a really exciting project. It just started this week, so it was super fun to see the students writing in Spanish and in Russian to my colleagues. So it's really cool to see my vision become a reality at 4 different institutions. The third grant is a National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education Grant for about $500,000. So haven't heard if that's been funded, but it would help to continue some of these virtual programs for 3 to 4 years. So fingers crossed on that one. So these cultural connections, you know, are so important to community college students. So a significant portion of our population has had very little experience traveling outside the United States. So this virtual internship approach is very cost effective. And it brings students to the other country in many ways so that they can really embrace another culture and see perspectives from another view. Sounds like a party.
That should be in the other section.
So it also, those virtual internships also provide students with a leg up in terms of job prospects because there's so many jobs these days now that are remote in the workforce. So I'm going to conclude here, but when I shared to some of my family members that I was going to Kazakhstan, they're like, "Oh, you're going to one of the stans." And you know, after this experience, I can share with you that it is such a wonderful country, very warm people. I felt safe all the time, and I formed some lasting friendships there. And it's nice for me to be able to advocate for Kazakhstan. So spasibo, thanks to Amirah and World Learning, also Carolyn Stokes of World Learning, as well as Adrian Earlinger of the American Councils for International Education, who helped form this partnership, as well as Gail Lynch, who's now in New York City, but she inspired me to apply for the Fulbright. So thank you. Spasibo.
Thank you, John, and thank you for valiantly working through the issues. I'm sorry about the sound, folks. Can everybody, is this still okay, the microphone? Okay. So I think, you know, as John showed, I mean, these are very short, intensive, and impactful grants, but there is so much opportunity for making those connections and furthering your own professional development, even while you are there to be, you know, providing your expertise to the host institution. Did you want to play anything? So with that, we are going to start to take a deeper dive into the program. The Fulbright Specialist Program, as I mentioned, there are over 400 individuals that are doing these grants on a year-round basis. And so what that means for us is that we are receiving projects from host institutions abroad on pretty much a rolling basis throughout the year. I would say we have new project almost every week where somebody is traveling out. And so, you know, because of that, the program utilizes a roster-based system where rather than have a specific deadline per year and have specific grants or awards that you are applying to, what you will do is actually apply to something we call the Fulbright Specialist roster, and then your application would be reviewed by a peer review panel. And then if you are approved, you would be added to that roster for a 3-year tenure. And that's the period of eligibility during which you are able to be matched with one of these projects. And the reason the program is designed this way is really just to overall allow us to match projects on a much quicker basis, because the reality is these projects are designed and driven by the host institutions themselves, and so their needs are emerging throughout the year. So we don't necessarily want to constrain them to a specific annual application process. The specifics of the host institution competition, I'm not going to get into here just because they are very country specific and they're governed by the Fulbright Commission or US Embassy in that country. So if you are from an institution overseas and you're interested in hosting a specialist, I would encourage you to reach out to the Fulbright Commission in your country or the US Embassy. And likewise, if you are aware of an institution that you think would be interested in hosting a specialist, that's what I would advise them to do. So, who is eligible to serve as a specialist? I won't go into all of the details, but the key criteria are that you must be a US citizen and you need to be able to demonstrate in your application materials that you have significant experience in your respective field. So either one of the disciplines or one of the specializations that's available under those disciplines. You can demonstrate that in a variety of ways. This program is available both to faculty, professional staff, as well as professionals outside of institutions of higher education. So that can be through a combination of your professional, academic, or artistic achievements. The key one that I do want to highlight here is that U.S. alumni of other Fulbright programs are eligible to apply to the Fulbright Specialist Program, and there's no waiting period between that. So if you've done one of the other programs, such as the Scholar Program, you don't necessarily need to wait to apply. And likewise, if you apply to the Fulbright Specialist roster and are accepted, that does not preclude you from applying to any of the other programs. So I do want to clarify that. If anybody in here has done a Fulbright Specialist grant in the past or has been admitted to the roster, you would need to wait 24 months to reapply to the roster, but you are able to For anyone who's interested in applying, I would encourage you to take a look at the website because we do have a full list of eligibility requirements there. So that's always helpful to help clarify your eligibility. But if you have any questions about your eligibility, please feel free to reach out to us by email or phone, and we can help provide you with personalized guidance on that. So once you've determined that you're eligible to apply, what do you actually do? So you can access the application through the Fulbright Specialist Program website. So this is not something that needs to flow through your institution. All you would need to do is go to the website. We've got the apply button everywhere, but the easiest place to find it is in the upper right-hand corner. And the application itself is fairly straightforward. I've included all of the components here. I'll talk about the essays in a moment, but you will be asked to upload your CV as well as provide a copy-paste CV into the field. And then you do need to provide reference contacts. There are 3 reference contacts that you can include, and they will be sent an automated email to complete a reference form. It should take about 10 to 15 minutes maximum for them to do that. But I do want to clarify that so that you don't need to reach out to them to write a specific letter. They will get a form to fill out. And then finally, you are able to provide your geographic preferences and language skills. These are not required. These items are pieces of information that help the team at World Learning potentially reach out to you about projects that may be available, which may be a match for your particular skill set or interest. And I'll go into matching a bit further on. So I mentioned I would talk about the essays. So you have 2 essays. They are a maximum of 1,500 words each. Essay 1 is going to ask you to address why you're interested in serving as a Fulbright specialist. And basically, just in layman's terms, like what is your area what are you an expert in, or what do you feel you're an expert in? Why do you think that would benefit your host institution abroad and your institution or employer in the US? So there are a couple of things that you'll need to unpack in this essay. One thing I do want to highlight is the prompt does ask you to include specific examples of activities. And if I put you on the spot, John, I looked at your application. I think you did a really great job of this because you did ensure that you put together a couple of examples of like, here are some trainings or things that I could potentially be doing as a specialist. So that prompt is not necessarily to have you create an exhaustive list of everything that you could possibly do, which I think can sometimes be easy to get hung up on because you're not necessarily sure who your host institution might be. It's really an opportunity for you to articulate, what do you feel that your strengths would be within the context of a 2 to 6 week exchange. The second essay is going to ask you to address any previous experience working in an international environment and basically why you would be an effective Fulbright specialist at an institution abroad. So this is really your opportunity to articulate, skills like cross-cultural adaptability, and if you do not have prior experience in an international setting, that's okay. That's not a prerequisite for this program. And so there is an opportunity there for you to just, describe what your philosophy is, to be a specialist in a cross-cultural context, or you could comment on international experiences that you've had working here in the US. So once you have submitted your application, your references have been contacted. At least 2 of those references have completed the reference form. Your application will be considered complete and is going to move forward for peer review. Because the program projects are happening on a rolling basis, we do have multiple deadlines per year for the peer review process. So I have included all of them here. The next one is February 4th, 2020. But if you start your application and you aren't able to finish it by that deadline, that's fine. It will move forward for peer review basically as soon as everything is completed. So peer review panels are going to be comprised of 3 individuals for the same general field as the applicant. They may not necessarily be in your specific area of expertise, but they will be in the same discipline. So that is an important consideration for anybody who has kind of an intersectional area of expertise, interdisciplinary expertise, or maybe has a variety of life experiences in different disciplines and they're not necessarily sure what discipline they should apply under. So I would encourage anyone for whom that is the case to select the discipline that they feel like they have the most strength in, because that's who is going to be reviewing your application. They do assess professional qualifications, cross-cultural skills, and adaptability, and then just your overall potential to benefit various stakeholders. So when I say stakeholders, that's really what's your potential to benefit an institution abroad, but also what's your potential to benefit, that this experience will benefit your community or your employer here in the United States. One key tip that I do have for applicants is to go to the website and look at the peer review panel criteria. We always provide the exact criteria that the peer review panel is looking at as they are reviewing your application. So when you're submitting your materials, you want to make sure that you hit each of those specific areas. All right, so we made it through all of eligibility, all of the application process. You've been accepted to the roster. Congratulations. Okay, what happens now? So this is where the matching process begins. You are eligible for a period of 3 years. So from the day that you receive your notification until 3 years from that point, you will have access to an online portal through which you can view and express your interest in all available open projects, and that's all projects in all disciplines. We do send an update once per month to everyone who is on the roster to just provide a highlight of all of the projects that are available. Each project has an associated internal deadline by which you need to express your interest in that project. So this is really an opportunity for individuals on the roster to look at what's available rather than having us give them a Cliff's Notes of, well, we think you might be an expert in this project, in this area, for you to actually be able to review the exact proposal that the host institution is submitting, because we don't necessarily know everything about you and what you might be interested in and what your specific sub-area of expertise is. That being said, World Learning is actively reviewing the roster, so every time an open project is available, we're looking at everyone's materials and trying to reach out to as many people as possible who we think might be a match for that project. So once the internal deadline has passed, a list of the qualified candidates is then going to be sent to the host institution to review and to select a finalist. And typically at that point, we would facilitate a conversation between the finalist and the host institution, just to ensure that everyone's on the same page and any questions are clarified, and to ensure that it's going to be a mutually beneficial match. So this is something that I do want to point out, because I think sometimes roster candidates don't necessarily realize that the host institution is the one that's reviewing the application. And so, when you express interest, what that is an up to 300-word statement and a CV. So when you're completing those notices of interest, you want to keep in mind that the host institution is going to be reviewing this directly. So you would be surprised, sometimes we get notices of interest that are like one sentence. I'm available on this date, here's my CV. And that's kind of like applying for a job without a cover letter, right? So you're missing out on an opportunity to really highlight to the host institution, why me? What could I bring to your institution? Why am I a better candidate than maybe anybody else who's interested in this project? So that is something to keep in mind. I do want to point out as well, host institutions may opt to request an individual to serve specifically as the specialist for a particular project. And as John had mentioned with this project, that's usually if they have a prior affiliation with the candidate or with their institution, or the candidate was recommended to them by somebody in their network. So once you are on the roster, you may consider sharing that fact with institutions that you have a relationship with, to make sure that they're aware of the program and also to notify, for example, your Fulbright Scholar Liaison that you are on the roster if your institution has one of those. All right, so you've gotten a project. Now what happens? So this is the point at which you'll really start to be communicating more directly with World Learning staff. So once you have been successfully matched to a project, World Learning staff will be taking over the grant implementation. So that's really serving as your primary point of contact throughout the preparations for your project, as well as during your time in the country. So we do things like distribute and collect all of your program forms, arrange your international travel, support visa applications in some cases, and then disperse your $200 per day honorarium payment. Half of that payment before you depart for your grant, and then the other half after you return and submit a final report. And we'll also check in with you to make sure you've arrived safely, and check in with you once at about a midway point of your grant. So this process, typically it varies depending on the project, but it would typically start to happen about 2 to 4 months before your project is actually set to start. And with that, I said I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'll be at the booth in the exhibit hall. We're booth number 7 with a big blue Fulbright tablecloth. And John will actually be there today as well from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. during the coffee break. So if you have more questions after this or just want to connect, feel free to stop by. But I've included my email here, and I also have my cards, as well as a card with all the deadlines on it for you if you'd like to take one of those. So I did want to thank everyone. Thanks for coming by and learning a little bit more about the Fulbright Specialist Program. I think this is a really excellent opportunity both for yourself and for your colleagues. I know it can be difficult to get away sometimes, so really these 2 to 6 week grants are an excellent opportunity to get that international exposure and connect with institutions overseas. So with that, we're gonna open up the floor for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
For John, actually, I wonder, obviously the experience that you had was really positive personally and professionally. Have you seen since coming back from your Fulbright Specialist Program like an impact on your home institution, your students or your colleagues from your participation in that project?
Right. Sure. So the question asked if I've seen a change in the administration and just in the college. Has it had an impact on our college? And we've had a change in our president very recently, and the information about my project is really getting out there. So I'm really excited to see the support behind the project and what I did. And so just recently it was shared at the Board of Trustees meeting so that they're aware of it. And I'll be talking to 50 to 100 people of our own students, faculty, and administrators next month to help spread the word about it. I've also, this past fall, had a session similar to this where I wanted to try to advocate for others to become Fulbright specialists. And I've helped a few people with their application, and one was recently placed on the roster. So now we're trying to find a match.
Could you explain a little bit more in detail what the virtual internship is?
That's for you, John.
Can you repeat that? The burps?
Virtual.
Oh, the virtual. Okay, yes. So you might be familiar with collaborative online international learning. So that has to do with the entire class working with another class in another country. The virtual internship is basically the same model, but with 1 or 2 students, where they're working on a project of significance for the organization or the university.